Act 1. The disturbance in the frame. It begins with a door. Not a legend, not a rumor, not a forbidden manuscript hidden in some archive. A door, 12 feet tall. The photograph is dated 1872. The building still stands today, renovated, repurposed, renamed. Tourists walk past it without noticing anything unusual. But in the original image, 3 men stand before that door. 2 appear ordinary by modern standards. The third does not. He is not posed. He is not highlighted. He is not presented as a spectacle. He stands casually, one hand resting against the doorframe, shoulders relaxed, gaze unfocused, as if waiting for the photographer to finish. He does not look extraordinary, which makes the proportions more unsettling. Because if the door is accurately scaled and its dimensions can still be measured, then the man standing beside it exceeds 8 feet in height. Perhaps the lens distorted perspective. Perhaps the ground slopes. Perhaps the angle misleads. One image means nothing. But then another appears. A railroad crew in 1883. 7 men, 3 noticeably taller than the others by a margin that cannot be explained by posture alone. Their boots align with the same ground line. Their hats clear the frame. They are not being displayed, they are simply there. And then something even stranger happens. After the late 19th century, these figures seem to vanish. Not gradually, not statistically, not through documented medical trend. They stop appearing. And absence in history is rarely accidental. Act 2. When height was ordinary. Modern anthropology tells us that extreme human height is rare and typically linked to medical conditions such as gigantism or acromegaly. These individuals often suffer physical complications. Their proportions are usually uneven, their posture strained. But the men in these photographs do not resemble medical anomalies. They appear balanced, proportional, integrated. They work. They stand guard. They labor in construction sites. No signage identifies them as curiosities. No newspaper clippings label them as spectacles. No circus advertisements accompany their presence. They seem disturbingly normal. This creates tension with accepted narratives. If such individuals were rare, why do they appear clustered in certain decades? If they were common enough to integrate seamlessly, why are they absent from structured historical discussion? Census records from the early 1800s are inconsistent but generally intact. Height data appears sporadically in military recruitment logs. Some entries exceed what modern averages would predict. But these tall entries do not form a category. They appear once, then disappear. And then there is the silence. Medical journals from the late 19th century begin categorizing gigantism more formally. Before that, references to extraordinary height are scattered, anecdotal, unclassified, almost as if the phenomenon was either normalized or overlooked. What if height distribution in the early industrial period was more diverse than we assume? And what if something altered that distribution? Act 3. Cities that sank. Around the mid-1800s, cities across multiple continents underwent dramatic transformation. Entire ground floors became basements. Windows, once level with sidewalks, now sit half-buried beneath stone and brick. Streets were raised, sometimes by several feet. Officially, these were infrastructure improvements. Sewer systems required regrading. Flood mitigation demanded elevation. Industrial growth necessitated restructuring. All plausible. Yet in many cities, sediment layers appear unexpectedly thick. Not inches, not carefully layered construction fill. In some cases, meters of compacted material. Buildings that appear designed for tall entryways now open into truncated arches. Grand staircases lead nowhere. Ventilation systems embedded in masonry seem disconnected from purpose. It is as if the world was adjusted vertically. If architecture reflects its intended occupants, then dramatic environmental shifts can disrupt usability. But architectural scale remains. The doorways stay tall. The ceilings stay high. The proportions persist. Which raises a question rarely asked. Were these buildings designed for aesthetic grandeur alone, or functional interaction with operators of different scale? Act 4. The knowledge problem. Technological knowledge is fragile. History provides examples of sophisticated techniques that vanished within a generation. Roman hydraulic cement, lost for centuries. Damascus steel forging, forgotten. Ancient agricultural terrace systems, abandoned. Knowledge is not permanent. It survives only through transmission. Many 19th century buildings demonstrate engineering complexity beyond what is casually attributed to the tools of their time. Ventilation networks embedded in structural cores. Acoustic chambers amplifying natural resonance. Water systems integrated vertically through walls. Some researchers argue these were early experiments in atmospheric electricity harnessing. Others dismiss such theories as speculative. Regardless of interpretation, one truth remains. Sophisticated systems require operators, and operators require training. If a demographic, defined not merely by height but by embodied expertise, disappeared during a period of environmental and industrial upheaval, then architectural remnants might persist as puzzles. We would inherit the shell without the instructions, and over time reinterpret purpose as decoration. Act 5. The disruption window. Between 1850 and 1890, global society experienced rapid acceleration. Rail networks expanded exponentially. Telegraph lines connected continents. Industrial manufacturing centralized labor. Simultaneously, historical documentation during this period shows irregular patterns. Archives destroyed without record of fire. Medical registries inconsistent across regions. Population tallies revised retroactively. Such irregularities can be attributed to bureaucratic chaos, but patterns of silence cluster around the same decades in which architectural burial and photographic anomalies overlap. Consider photography itself. Early glass plates capture unfiltered reality. Later reproductions often involve reframing, cropping, perspective adjustments. In some cases, original plates suggest greater height discrepancy than later published versions. Is this deliberate normalization or simple aesthetic correction? The answer may never be definitive, but the timing remains provocative. Why do images featuring extreme height cluster within the same historical window that cities were vertically restructured? Why does that clustering cease shortly thereafter? Act 6. Catastrophe and reset. Major upheaval can reset not only infrastructure but narrative. Floods, fires, wars, epidemics all reshape memory. If widespread environmental sedimentation occurred, whether natural or coordinated urban regrading, it would provide opportunity for systemic transformation. During reconstruction, certain populations can become displaced. Trades become obsolete. Roles dissolve. Social hierarchies shift. If a physically distinct group existed, integrated but specialized, rapid industrialization may have rendered their skill set irrelevant. Machines replace embodied scale. Standardization replaces diversity. Uniform factory ceilings replace soaring chambers. In such transitions, certain demographics fade from necessity, and over generations, fade from memory. This does not require conspiracy. It requires acceleration. Act 7. The anthropological void. The most unsettling element is not the presence of tall figures in early photographs. It is the absence of sustained discourse. Anthropology thrives on anomaly. Yet the apparent clustering of extreme height in certain decades is rarely discussed outside fringe circles. Why? Possibilities abound. Perspective illusion, camera lens distortion, footwear variation, platform staging, all valid considerations. Yet when anomaly repeats across geography and decade, dismissal becomes less satisfying. If extreme height were common enough to appear integrated, we would expect broader record. If it were rare enough to ignore, we would not expect visual clustering. The tension lies between those extremes. Act 8. Architecture as Memory. Buildings outlive people. They preserve scale even when occupants change. Walk through a 19th century civic hall. Stand beneath its arches. Feel the vertical exaggeration. Was it purely symbolic? A display of power and permanence? Or was it functional for operators interacting with elevated systems? In industrial standardization, ceiling heights decreased. Efficiency replaced grandeur. Did architecture shrink because materials became cheaper, or because scale requirements changed? We may never know, but architectural memory persists longer than written record. And sometimes memory is encoded in proportion. Act 9. Progress or recovery. Modern narratives emphasize constant upward trajectory. Each generation surpasses the last. But what if industrialization was not pure advancement, but partial recovery? What if certain techniques were rediscovered, simplified, standardized? If knowledge fragments during upheaval, what returns may appear novel, though once commonplace? The possibility that humanity lost, not mythically, but practically, certain embodied expertise during the 19th century is not impossible. The question is not whether giants ruled the earth. The question is whether demographic and architectural diversity once exceeded our current assumptions. Act 10. The Weight of Silence. Absence carries weight. When photographs stop depicting certain proportions, when documentation shifts tone, when architecture no longer matches inhabitant scale, the silence deserves inquiry. Not accusation, not immediate belief, inquiry. History is shaped by what survives, but it is also shaped by what does not. If a demographic, however defined, vanished within a narrow historical window, and if that disappearance aligned with environmental and infrastructural upheaval, then further investigation is warranted. Perhaps perspective fooled us. Perhaps lenses deceived. Perhaps urban sediment explains everything. Or perhaps something more subtle occurred. A transition so rapid it erased nuance. And nuance, once erased, is difficult to restore. Act 11. The Final Question. The most unsettling thought is not that giants once walked among us. It is that scale, human scale, may not have been as fixed as we believe. Height averages fluctuate with nutrition, environment, and stress. Industrialization brought both improvement and disruption. If extreme stature declined due to environmental factors, dietary shifts, disease, stress of urban crowding, then its disappearance could be biological rather than mysterious. Yet biological shifts leave evidence, which returns us to the photographs. They remain grainy, sepia, uncomfortable. They show proportions that resist easy explanation, and then they stop. In history, endings without explanation invite imagination, but imagination must be tempered by restraint. Perhaps the giants were never giants, only illusions of frame and ground. Perhaps architecture was only grandeur, never functionality. Perhaps the mud was only mud. But if inquiry ceases because the question feels inconvenient, history narrows. And narrowing is a form of forgetting. What vanished after 1800? Was it a demographic? A skill set? A building philosophy? A biological diversity? Or simply our willingness to examine anomaly without ridicule? The buildings stand. The photographs exist. The sediment remains beneath our streets. The question persists. Not whether giants ruled the past, but whether something larger than we currently understand once shaped the world and slipped quietly into silence.